Yitzi, it's about time we talked about this very important topic.
Let's do it.
This week, Parashat Shlach here in Eretz Yisrael. A couple of years ago, we discussed the story of the Meraglim in the beginning of the Parsha, the story that takes the most attention out of this Parsha. We also discussed the Meraglim in Parshat Devarim a few years ago. We'll link those videos at the end of this one. This year, I want to talk about the end of the Parasha. I want to talk about Parashat Tzitzit, the famous Parsha we say a couple of times a day. We say it also on Seder night, the very famous Mitzvah of Tzitzit, because even though we say it every single day, there are many questions that rise from reading the Psukim and trying to understand Pshat level in the Psukim. What exactly is the Torah telling us over there? Because when you start reading the Psukim, you can get all confused. As we know, you don't explain a word, a definition, using the word itself, but when the Torah teaches us about tzitzit, that's exactly what it does. It says, V'asu lahem tzitzit, you have to make a tzitzit, al kanfei bigdehem ledorotam, v'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf titchelet. But then where do you do this tzitzit? On the tzitzit of the kanaf. But what is tzitzit? But you do it, and then v'aya lachem letzitzit, you will have a tzitzit. So what exactly is the Torah saying? What is tzitzit? Is it the strings we put there? Is it the corner? Is it everything together? What is tzitzit? But even more importantly, the tzitzit is meant in order to show us, to be there, to remind us, how exactly does the tzitzit remind us of all the mitzvahs that Hashem gave us? What exactly is the tzitzit doing? How does this stop us from not letting our eyes go wander off to wherever they want? So what exactly is tzitzit about? What is the mitzvah of tzitzit? And how exactly does it work with the psukim itself?
That's very interesting. Often the words we see most, we question the least. And, there could be such big questions and things that we see all the time. We just don't stop and actually take a look. And I want to actually start from the end here, from the reason, the purpose. You mentioned that the pasuk is saying that the purpose of the tzitzit is so we'll see it and we'll remember. And I think the common way of seeing things, and it's also brought in Rashi, meaning that the eyes are the problem. The eyes see bad things and then the heart wants it, and this is how we go and end up doing bad things, because we look around, we see negative things and we're attracted to them, and that's how we end up failing. But when we look at the psukim carefully, we'll see something else. It doesn't say first the eye, then the heart. It says the opposite. It says velo tatu acharei levavchem, and only then acharei einechem, meaning don't follow your hearts and your eyes. So what's causing what? Is the eyes causing the heart, or is the heart causing the eyes? And based on the psukim, it seems the other way around. In other words, the problem isn't the eyes. Your eyes are a tool. How do I know that? Because if we go to the beginning of the pasuk, we see that what is the solution? Your eyes. Your eyes are going to see the tzitzit, and they're going to drive the heart. You're going to remember. It's going to open up your heart, and you're going to remember Mitzvahs Hashem. So it's actually the opposite. If your eyes were actually just seeing reality, the true, real reality as it is, it may actually open your heart. The problem is that you know what you're looking for. Your heart is taking something. Your heart is leading the way. You go out to the world and you see things, but the problem is that you're looking for things, and those things that you're looking for is exactly what you're going to see. And maybe that's why this Parsha shows up here after the Meraglim, because that's exactly what happened. They went to Eretz Yisrael. You can see a lot of things in Eretz Yisrael. You can see the blessings of Eretz Yisrael. You can see the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. You can see so much, but that's not what they were looking for. Their hearts were looking for the problems. Their hearts were looking for the negative. If you let that drive, that search for negative, be the one that's driving what you're going to see, then that's what you're going to see. And maybe that's what the tzitzis are doing. What does the word tzitzit come from? We know the word tzitzit from the word latzutz. Vayatzet tzitz. We'll see this in the next parsha, when out of the staff of Aaron, something begins to blossom. When something that's covered breaks out of that covering. Matzitz min hacharakim, when you look between the cracks. That's the concept of latzutz, of tzitzit. And maybe that's what we're doing here. We're taking cloth, we're going to the edge of the cloth, where the clothing seems to be finished. And that's how usually negative people see the world. They look at the reality, they say, this is the end, this is the border, this is what can be. Nothing nothing beyond it. And exactly at that edge, we break out of that picture. We have the strings that are ציצית, that are tzatzim, that show that what you may see at first is not the reality. If you're looking deeper in the cracks, you'll see those things that are not yet there, but they're going to blossom, they're going to break out, they're going to come out and reveal what's hidden. And from there, you'll remember Kol Mitzvot Hashem, because all of Mitzvot Hashem are exactly that. We have the reality that could look empty of godliness, that can look stuck, fixed, nothing can change, nothing can move. And when we look deeper at Mitzvot Hashem, they're about bringing out that depth, that hidden side that's going to break out. And when it does, it's going to blossom and impact everything. What the Tzitzit are teaching us is how to look at the world. Looking, your eyes can be a very powerful tool, but it depends what you're looking for, and your heart decides what you're looking for. If taturu acharei levavchem, and then you'll go into Eretz Yisrael and see, all you're going to see is the negative. If you fix that, if you realize the tzitzit, if you realize that ability of things to latzutz, to break out of the cracks, that what you don't see right now and may be covered, maybe right there just below the earth and is about to come out and blossom. When you recognize that, then you'll be ready to actually enter Eretz Yisrael. Then you'll be ready to see things the way they actually deeply and truly are.
Very good, very good. Really, like you're saying, it's important to note in the Psukim that really first it's lo taturu acharei levavchem, and then it's einechem. Just like you're saying, usually when somebody looks for something, first the drive is the heart. It's not about what you're looking at, but it's what you're looking for. Like you were saying, it's what your heart is looking for to look at. And that's exactly why we have first, in order to make sure that you look at the good things that Hashem put into this world, we have the ציצית over there as a reminder, as a siman, as a sign to show us, to remind us, to make sure that our focus, our vision, what we're looking at is on it, is on the ציצית, is on the mitzvot of Hashem. And as the chinuch says, that there's nothing better for memory, for remembering, other than having HaKadosh Baruch Hu's mark on the clothes you wear on you in order to remind you. And just like also the Rambam says in the end of Hilchot Tzitzit, that even though a person doesn't have to, is not mechuyav to go out and buy a talis or a tzitzis, it is ra'ui that a person should want to wear a tzitzit, should want to have that mark of HaKadosh Baruch Hu on them in order to have a constant reminder of the mitzvot of Hashem, of what Hashem is expecting from us. And you know, also you mentioned, where does the idea of tzitzit come from? It comes from the idea of tzitz, and we also know the tzitz that Aaron had on his forehead, on his metzach, on the top. And there's a very interesting balance over here between the tzitz that's set on the top of the head towards Shamayim with the words Kodesh La Hashem, towards Hashem, and the tzitzit that has to be on the kanaf til. The halacha says that they have to fall down towards earth. And when you think about it like that, these are the two powers that are pulling us in this world. We have the desire to go to Shamayim, to go up to the holiness, to try and climb levels, but then again, we have what pulls us down. We have gravity that pulls us down towards Olam Hazeh, towards Olam HaMaaseh, towards this world and all the materialistic things in this world. And we've talked about this also in the past, about the idea of a beged, of a clothes that you wear. Beged in Hebrew is from the same shorish of boged, of betrays, that sometimes you can use these begadim in order to cover yourself up and in order to hide yourself from the world. But the idea over here is to do the exact opposite, to use these begadim that we have in order to connect us to Shamayim through this world, through Olam Hazeh, through the materialistic world, to connect us Kodesh La Hashem towards Shamayim. And also there's a very famous midrash that says, why do we put tchelet in the tzitzit? Ki tchelet domeh leyam, domeh lerakia, shedomeh lekisei hakavod. The tchelet reminds us of the sea, reminds us of the sky, which reminds us of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's throne in the sky. And you have to ask yourself, what is the sea doing over there? Why can't we just say that the tchelet reminds us of the sky? Why do we have to go through the sea in order to remind us of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? But this is exactly it. The tzitzit, first of all, reminds us that we are in this world. We are in the materialistic world. This is the world we live in. We are not angels. We're not malachim. We're not expected to be holy like the malachim. We are human beings. But being human beings, we have to try to pull ourselves upward. We have to try to pull ourselves towards the tzitz, towards Kodesh La Hashem. And also, as we know, the sea isn't really blue. The sea is see-through, but it gets its blue color because it's facing the sky, because the Shamayim is Shamayim, the connection between the two, the relationship between the two. The same thing with us. We have to aspire towards Shamayim, towards the holiness, and try to climb there. But again, not forget that we are in this world and we have to use these simanim, we have to use these signs on the edge, like you were saying, to remind us of our responsibility. And maybe this is again the difference between latur, to be a tourist, and uritem, to look at something deep into something. Latur, which is just scouting around, which is looking around, which is in Hebrew, latur is the same word as tayar, as a tourist, is very different than uritem oto, which when you look at at something in a very deep and meaningful way. And as we know, there's a big difference between visiting a place as a tourist and actually living in that place day after day throughout your entire life. Maybe this is one of the biggest problems that the Meraglim had with the Aretz, that they looked at it as tourists, looked at it as people who are just visiting there, instead of looking at the Aretz as people who live there, who can see the depths. Tamid, always, just like the Pasuk tells us, that the Aretz, Tamid, Nei Hashem Elokei Chaba, it's always there. Hashem's eyes are always in that land. This is what the Meraglim missed. This is what Yeshua and Kalev are telling them that you guys are missing, that it looks like a simple land, but it's not. You have to look at it as the prominent eyes of HaKadosh Baruch Hu are always there, are always looking at that land. Maybe also that's the difference between Uritem Oto and Lotatu, and that is our job, not only to glance at the tzitzit, not let your heart and desire glance at the world in a very superficial way, but rather look at the world in a more deep way with deeper meaning through the tzitzit and through the mitzvot of HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
It's interesting, you mentioned Tchelet domeh liyam v'yam domeh l'rakia, that the blue of the Tchelet looks like the sea and the sea looks like the sky. And it's interesting because I was speaking before about things that you don't see because they're covered and they tzatz and they come out. But actually the Tchelet domeh liyam is interesting because if you come up and see the water and you hold the water in your hand, you don't see any blue. It's clear. And by the way, it's the same about the skies too. If you come up close, you don't see it. Only when you take a step back, then do you see it's blue. So in other words, the reason you don't see something can vary. Sometimes because you're not looking deep enough, it's covered and something is about to come out, and if you would look deeper, you would see it. And sometimes because you're too up close and you're not taking a step back and looking at the bigger perspective. One way or another, both of these we learn from the tzitzit. The tzitzit that breaks out of the edges of the clothing which seem like the end, but it breaks out of them, and the tchelet that reveals that sometimes we need to take a step back and look at the bigger picture, and then we'll see the blue, and then we'll see the tchelet, then we'll see kisei hakavod. Both of these we see in our Parsha. We see in our Parsha in the negative way, in the perspective of the Meraglim, which get so caught up in something and don't take a step back and even look at their own words, at what they're talking about and what a great present Eretz Yisrael is, and the perspective of seeing only what's on the surface and not looking deeper. Both these problems we see at the beginning of the Parsha, and the solution and the key to help us see better is the tzitzit.
Beautiful, wonderful, and we can continue talking about tzitzit and the Meraglim. It goes even deeper, especially the Meraglim that they were commanded to see the land. They came back after they saw the land and the people that are sitting in it. Well, we're out of time and we can't discuss it now. Maybe next year we'll discuss that idea. I'll just remind the viewers again that last year in Parshat Shlach we actually discussed the concept of how come Am Yisrael, even though they did tshuva, they still got punished, because right after Ched Meraglim, when they're told that they can't go into the land of Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael decides to do tshuva. The Torah tells us that they did tshuva and they want to go back to Eretz Yisrael and they get punished for doing tshuva. How come? What happened exactly over there? We'll link that video at the end of this one. We'll also link, as I said, the video from the year before that when we discussed the whole idea of the Meraglim being just like an online mob and online trolls trying to knock somebody down, trying to knock you down. We'll link those two videos. Also, if you're interested, like I mentioned in Parshat Dvarim, we also talked lengthily about the Meraglim. You can look it up on the channel too. And as usual, if you enjoyed these videos, please feel free to comment below, like the video, share it with a friend. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing. And Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and Mitzvahs of Hashem. We'll talk again next week.